Okay, so today I've got a roll here of Rollei Infrared. Now, as I said, I'm going to be doing a few projects on Rollei Infrared this year, and infrared film in general, including a few others such as HIE and FK. I hope I pronounced that correctly. One of the things that I've come across lately is issues with exposing infrared correctly. Now, if I shoot during the middle of the day at f8 in 1 second, I generally get a pretty strong effect. I get everything exposed well, but speaking to quite a few others on Reddit, I might be going a little bit overboard and overkilling my infrared. It does not need to be exposed that much, many say, and what's actually salvaging my technically overexposed image is the fact that you can basically scan black and white that's heavily overexposed by a number of stops or underexposed by a number of stops, and as long as it's a pretty good black and white film, you're going to go ahead and be able to get an image that is more than decent enough. But that got me thinking, what is the actual exposure of Rollei Infrared? What should I actually try rate it for, so that if I'm in different scenarios that aren't brightly lit, can I try expose for those scenarios, and in particular on cloudy days? So there are a number of online discussion forums that actually state this film to be with an infrared filter to be 6 ISO or 12 ISO. Now that might depend on the quality of your infrared filter. Seeing as no one's bothered to go ahead and do an actual what is the ISO of this film video on YouTube, I thought I'd take it off the forums, go ahead and record this video here. I've got my light meter on here. So this is going to be rated for ISO 6. I'm going to go ahead and shoot at f8 1 second first, then ISO 6, and then ISO 12. That will be pretty straightforward and simple, quick, easy comparison, and I've bought my Mamiya 645 with me. Now, the thing about my Mamiya 645 is that it will have 15 exposures, and that is perfect for this test because I will be doing sets of 3, so that will give me 5 sets of photos to compare and see what ISO I should be rating this film at, or if I should be just sticking to my f8 1 second rule and just not giving a shit. So to keep it an apples to apples comparison, we're going to keep it at f8 for all the shots, and what we're going to do is just adjust the shutter speed based on what the ISO rating is being metered by this light meter right here. So it is saying 1/8. Let's see how this goes. And then 1/13, which will be 1/10, or 1/15 actually. Okay, so for ISO 12, which I've just adjusted the light meter for, it is saying 1/13, which will be about 1/15, which I've adjusted on the Mamiya 645. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so future me is probably going to tell you how it went, but currently for now I have no idea which will actually look correct, but we will go ahead and see. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to my next location. Okay, so I might be a bit of a silhouette right now, I have no idea, but if I am, I hope I look dark and mysterious. I'm going to go ahead and take a new photo that I've been wanting to take, and hopefully it looks good. Okay, 3, 2, 1. We are now on shot number 2 for photo number 2. This will be metered at ISO 6. It's saying 1/4 of a second, and I'm shooting at f8. Okay, I've now adjusted it to ISO 12. Shot number 3. Photo number 2. Okay, shot number 3, photo number 2. can't believe that. Well, that's a great moment to have happen. I don't know what's happened, but my camera's jammed. There is something up with my camera. I was able to get the mirror to come back up, but the shutter mechanism is not firing. This is really handy for some future tests that I want to do, and I want to use this camera. Well, there goes my test for today. Okay, so I've had a lot of issues here with this video. One of the first things being this here is my infrared camera, and now I will speak about this infrared camera in the future in a future video, but I was recording with this and I wanted to do something a little bit different, to record the world of infrared in the video space as well, not just in what I take with a photo. And well, yeah, this camera dropped and I lost about 20 minutes worth of footage. The split has gotten probably actually a little bit worse. Since I've last thinged, you can see a crack on here, and it has really proven the point that sometimes when you try to do a video, just everything works against you. First, there was the issue itself with the Mamiya 645. The camera here requires a battery, and the battery died whilst I was shooting on day one of the video. By the time I got that all sorted out and figured that was the issue, I really couldn't go out and shoot again, and then the weather turned to absolute shit. That's just sometimes the way it is when you go ahead and try to shoot a video. So yeah, it did cause some issues and it did ruin one of the shots. Now here is the shots, and as you can see, they're a little bit curled because that's just sometimes the way that some films like to behave. But you can see here that I've got a number of shots, and this photo in particular is completely overexposed. And well, that's what happens when you have a camera that dies and the shutter is just staying open. It will go ahead and cause overexposure issues. But that being said, I think honestly this experiment did work. I could see what was working for me and what works for my infrared filter. I didn't test every infrared filter that I have, but apparently different infrared filters have different filter values and they have a different varying degree of quality, which means that some people get more or less transmission of light through the filter, and that can make quite a degree of difference as to what they actually end up getting through the filter and what shot they actually get. So whilst I have 5 locations, and of those 5 locations I've got, I guess what would be 15 variable results. Through the results are being varied in sets of 3. I can see without a doubt what I think or how I should be shooting with this film. Now, to start off with my first location, you can go ahead and see that there is 3 massive differences here with the negative and how much light is actually being captured. The 1 second exposure is definitely the most dense, and when you look at the photo itself, it has the most shadow detail. Then we get to the ISO 6 shot, which is reasonably dense, and I think this is a normal level of being dense. I still think that it's a little underexposed. There is definitely not as much shadow detail, and when you go ahead and try to bring out shadow detail, you just don't end up with much. And then if you look at ISO 12, luckily this location was very well exposed, but you can see here that it is a more underdeveloped negative, and when I go ahead and try to bring out that shadow detail, there is just nowhere near as much. Now when you get to my second location, the first of many issues that I've had shooting this video, you can still see here, even with the overexposed photo, I'm getting a consistent series of results. So as we can see here with my very first photo of this set, that I have a very nicely dense negative with lots of detail. And then if you look at the second shot, which is at ISO 6, there is detail, but nowhere near as much. There is a considerable difference in detail already. And when you look at the photos, you can see that there's just nowhere near as much shadow information. Now, as for the overexposed photo, if it hadn't been overexposed, it would have been like the other results for ISO 12. Definitely lacking in shadow detail and nowhere near as usable. Now, I did try to bring out the detail from this photo and go ahead and see if I could actually get anything, but unfortunately that wasn't the case with this negative. It was just heavily overexposed and I just wasn't going to be able to bring out much detail at all. Now, with my next location, I've gone ahead and shot this location before on infrared, and you can see what it looks like here with an infrared shot that I took a while ago, another infrared shot that I've taken a wee while ago as well, and this infrared shot which was shot on a Fujica 6x17. And then also, whilst I'm at it, how about some C41 on 400D, and this shot here that I took on Lomo Purple. Now, let's contrast those shots with what I've taken here, so you've got an understanding that I know this location very well and I know how it should look. Now, we can go with the very first shot, which is the 1 second at f8. That is the most densest of the shots so far. Now, there is less of a degree of difference between that and the second shot that I did. Now you can see here that there is still quite a degree of detail with the ISO 6, but nowhere near as much, and it's still definitely lacking in those shadow details. And then likewise with the ISO 12, that is a fair degree of underexposure. Now, I did shoot this in the real world environment the second day that I went out to complete this project. It just wasn't as sunny. Like, it was a sunny-ish day, but the clouds were rolling in and out, and it wasn't one of those really hot sunny days, which I think are the best days to go ahead and shoot infrared. It did mean that there was just way more variance in the light, but I had my light meter on the entire time when I took the shot. So as I was taking it, there wasn't a change in the light meter, but it definitely shows a consistent result that I'm getting with the filter and light meter combo that I have, and that is ISO 12 is not usable, and I just found that to be completely consistent. Now, as for the next location, here is a couple of infrared shots that I've taken here before. Now, here's a shot on Kodak's legendary HIE, which is the high-speed infrared film. This was expired, but you can see what the shot looks like. And then here is another infrared shot that I've taken before. And then here's a shot on Lomo Purple, and here's a shot on Provia. And now here's a shot that I took on infrared film that I had turned into black and white slide film. And you can see all of the detail there. Now, that was actually metered, I think, at ISO 6 the last time that I went ahead and took a photo here, and that was done recently last year. Now, I felt at the time that maybe shooting at ISO 6 might not be the best. Go ahead and shoot infrared film. And what I wanted to do was go ahead and see whether that was the case just because it was black and white slide film and maybe I needed to shoot it a little bit differently, or whether by shooting it as a black and white negative, which black and white negatives have way more variation in latitude. Now, black and white slides have more variation than normal color slide film, but they don't have as much latitude as black and white film. Nothing does. So what I wanted to do was really test this with black and white negative film to really see if there was such a degree in difference. And so far, my test results are showing that. If we look at the black and white negative right here, we can go ahead and see with the fourth location that I have a reasonably dense negative. There is some darkness around. You can see in the lighter spots, there's nowhere near as much detail, and that does show on the photo, but that's what happens when you shoot a contrasty scene. You sometimes just don't have as much detail. Now we can see on the negative to negative, on the second shot that there is still quite a degree of detail there with the ISO 6, but nowhere near as much. And I found that, yeah, it just wasn't having as much shadow detail. And same with the ISO 12. Definitely out of the ISO 12 shots, this had probably the second best amount of information, but still nowhere near as much as the ISO 6 shot, and in particular the f8 1-second shot. And then we get to our final scene. Now, by this point, like I said, my camera had dropped and I lost about 20 minutes of footage. Yeah, I needed to get back to work and I was just running out of time and I had things to do. So what I did is I just went ahead and shot that lake location again, just shot it as quickly as I possibly could. I metered everything, but I did get a high degree of variation right here. The first negative, which is shot at f8 at 1 second, comes out with plenty of information. Heaps of information on that negative. You can see so much detail. Now, I don't know what happened, and there was a weird instance with the final shots. You can see here both of them are exposed about the same and both of them are massively missing detail. Now, like I said, I had a light meter. I did meter the lighting, and I think, check it against my phone, and for some reason on both ISO 6 and ISO 12 it was giving me the same settings, and on both of those shots it is severely underexposed, basically not usable. I just couldn't get a usable photo out of those. I don't know what happened in that situation, but it kind of proves my running thesis with shooting infrared. I know a lot of people on Reddit had disagreements with me over what ISO or how you should shoot Rollei Infrared, but looking at these negatives, you can see which have clearly got density. And the more dense your image, not too dense of course, but the more dense your image, the more information you have, the better results you're going to have, and you're going to have more detail in the shadows. Remember, you can always bring back the highlights, but you can't bring out shadow detail if there is not shadow detail recorded. Film is light hungry, and so I would rather overexpose than underexpose, and I feel even ISO 6 is an underexposure. I do think it's not too far off how you should rate the film, but if I was going to say how you should actually rate this film, I would say it's a stop more, or maybe 2. So ISO 6 I think becomes ISO 3, and then one stop more, the ISO 1.5. So if I was going to say what is the truest, best ISO for Rollei Infrared, it wouldn't be ISO 6, it would be ISO 1.5. But that's only based on the filters that I use. If you buy probably some more high-grade filters, you probably might get different results. So what I would say is, out of doing this test, that it is completely subjective, more so because everyone has slightly different gear, and I buy the cheaper filters, just, you know, I'm not going to spend a ridiculous amount on them, and if I did, I would be spending like $600 New Zealand on a bunch of infrared filters. For what purpose? I can happy to shoot with a tripod and shoot at f8 and 1 second. I think for me, I'm going to stick to that f8 1 second. I am going to go ahead and try shoot at like ISO 6, but if I'm going to shoot ISO 6 and start shooting handheld and trying to experiment with that, I'm gonna go ahead and probably push the film, because I still think the film is more like ISO 3 or 1.5 if you really want to get the density and the negative. ISO 12 is definitely not usable. Now, another caveat to say is that you've got to remember that New Zealand's sun is quite different to other countries. If you ever visit this country, you will feel the difference in the sun, because we have a hole in the ozone and we end up with a different light. It feels completely different. Until you've come here and experienced it, you will not understand what I'm saying. But the light actually looks and feels different, and you've got to be very careful for one, getting sunburnt here. We have one of the highest cancer rates in the world, but
I have a feeling that not only do we have issues like that, the way the light is here is quite different, and you might end up having different experiences when you meter here and you shoot here than other countries, and I've definitely found that to be the case with other films. So I wonder if Rollei Infrared is no different. Anyway, as always, it's been real, guys. Until next time.